Shims are used a lot with woodworking, and while you can go to the store and buy a pack of pine ones for about $1 or $2, these are pine and they have a real problem with breaking and they're just not very good. So if you want to use something like a white oak, then you have a problem. When it comes to making wedges for furniture or other projects in woodworking, you're again left to try to find a way to make those cuts. I've seen some really complicated jigs for the bandsaw, the miter gauge, table saw, but a lot of them look kind of scary to use and they really don't need to be. So instead of using a lot of materials or taking a long time to make a jig, we'll go ahead and set this aside. These 3 pieces are all you need to make a really simple jig that works with the table saw. We'll take our first 2 pieces here, and these are just scrap, and really I'm showing you the concept so you can play around with this a little bit, but very simply, you want to have this smaller piece lap over the side of our longer piece. I'm going to go ahead and add some hot glue. You can use super glue, you could add screws if you want to, but hot glue will work just fine. Depending on the thickness of the material that you plan on cutting, this needs to make sure that it's not going to be too long and go past our stock. So if I'm using this piece here, this would work just fine. Now that this is cooled, we need to find a piece of wood that's going to be the thickness of the thickest part of our shim. This is going to be about as thick as the shim that I've got. This is a store-bought shim. And again, my stock's going to come here like this on the table saw, and this needs to go no lower than the piece of stock that I plan on cutting. So if I put it right there, that's going to work. It's going to need to be right on this corner, so I'll go ahead and add a little bit of glue. I'll add this on. Again, I don't want to be too high. Once that has been hot glued and it's cooled, our jig is done. But this is what it looks like. Very simple. We're ready to take this over to the table saw. At the table saw, the first thing that I want to do is set my blade so that it's just proud of the surface. We don't want to go any farther than the very top of the surface. With our jig, it's just going to slide right on that corner there. And this piece here will be against the fence, and the top part of the stock will be the other side of the fence. So 2 points, 1 point here, and 1 point here on the end. From here, I can go ahead and make my cuts, but if I want to make this repeatable so that I can make it a little bit quicker, what I want to do is I want to come up to this blade and find where the tooth is going to cut that thin layer off, the very start of that cut. And I just want a little bit at the very end here, just a little tiny bit. So right about there, I'll lock my fence down. And now I'm going to take my block of wood and my jig and bring this down right about here. This place here on my table saw, actually I can mark it and then erase it later on. Most table saws don't have this, but we can always use a piece of tape. This is painter's tape. Add it to this. You have to be really careful that it doesn't come up as you're using this and start rolling on you, which has happened to me already once. And then I'll use a pencil right here, and I can come back to that line each time as I move my fence in to make that cut. So let's go ahead and make our first cut. And I highly recommend using a push block to run this through. If you don't have a push block like this that has these pegs on the end, you can just use a regular push block and add some screws and it'll work. So let's go ahead and do this. Now I've made my first one. It looks pretty good. I'm going to take my jig off now, flip my piece over, and I'm going to line up the end of my point right on that line like that. Now I can make my cut again and slice this off. Again, using a push block. These are really narrow, so let's make something that would be comparable to something that you would buy in the store. This is a 2x6 scrap that I found. This would be comparable to the shims that you'd buy in the store. I'll go ahead and line this up on my line again. Now I've gotten as far down as I can with this block. If I go any more, I take a chance that I'm going to cut into my jig, and I don't want to do that. But that doesn't mean that we are done with this block. I can take my next block. I'm just going to add some hot glue to the end. And I'll add my other piece on so that I can keep going. As long as you put enough hot glue on this, it should work fine. You probably will lose a little bit in the middle here, but that's okay too. I didn't quite make that last pass, but I'm only wasting this entire piece from an entire 2x6. And I made more than I could have bought. And this is just a little tiny piece of a scrap. It really is simple and cheap to make your own. It doesn't take much but this little tiny jig. If you want to make shims, that works fine, but we'll go ahead and take this off. I'll use a chisel to clean up the hot glue. Of course, you could always just make a brand new one. There really isn't a whole lot to this. But now I'll add a 1/2 inch piece to the end. We'll glue it on again with hot glue, and we'll make some wedges. Once again, I'll add my scrap here. We'll place this up against the fence again. I just need to make sure that my spacer block is on this edge and that my point down here is against the fence. And once again, I'm going to line this up to my line. And we've got some perfect Padauk wedges here. I've got a shorter piece here that I wanted to cut, so I just added some hot glue to that one side, and we'll try this out now. So this will work really well with really short pieces, but let's try something a little bit longer. Now that was a lot harder, and if you plan on doing something this long, I think this is probably about 20 inches, 18 inches, then I would add a longer fence, as it will want to hit the end of this and start moving in with that cut. So anything less than maybe 18 inches, 16 inches, you're gonna want to add a longer fence. But that's it for this video. Let me know down in the comments what you think of this, if you plan on making one yourself. If you do leave a comment though, thank my patrons. They help keep this going, my website and everything else. So anyway, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Keep making things.